The 624th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Walton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered. Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
Great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony back with you guys here on a Monday night, here to recap a big win for Carolina that came on Sunday afternoon in the Smith Center. They took down the Georgetown Hoyas 81-61 to improve to 8-1 on the year. And we're here to talk about that game. We'll take a look at the box score. You'll hear from head coach Hubert Davis and his thoughts about the win. We'll deliver our stat of the game, hand out our game balls, and talk through a game like we normally do. A lot to unpack, so let's go ahead and get right into the meat and potatoes of this one. As I mentioned, Carolina, they beat Georgetown 81-61 yesterday. They improved to 8-1 on the season, and they were led by the tandem that is emerging, in my opinion, the best front court tandem in all of college basketball. Caleb Wilson and Henri Veesaar, they both produced double-doubles in the victory. They combined for 38 points and 29 rebounds when it's all said and done. And they were just doing two stalwarts for Carolina all night long on a night where the Heels shoot 48% from the field. 4 players score in double figures. So a much more balanced offensive performance as opposed to what we saw on Tuesday night when Carolina had to win a grinder against Kentucky. But what's been the theme of Carolina in their big wins? This has been the second half defense. Georgetown shot just 22% from the field in the second half, including going 1 of 13 from behind the three-point line. And that's why Carolina was able to pull away for a comfortable win after being up 44-39 at the break. A lot of history between these two programs. First time Carolina's beaten Georgetown since 1999. It was a throwback type of day in the Smith Center. Carolina, of course, wearing their throwback uniforms. The graphics had a 1980s type of feel to them in terms of what you saw on the scoreboards inside the arena. And you throw it back to 1982. That's when Carolina beats Georgetown to win a national championship. This time they didn't need a freshman to make a jumper with less than 20 seconds left to go to prove them to be decisive, but nonetheless, Carolina got a really big win over Georgetown, and more importantly, they avoid the letdown factor coming off the big win at Kentucky on Tuesday, which kind of shows the signs of maturity. This group, which is still learning how to play together, what they possess as this season moves forward.
Yeah, I think it definitely shows some signs of maturity and growth for this group. I mean, coming off the Kansas game, I never really felt like even in that game, Carolina took their next opponent lightly. I think, when you look at it, Radford is probably just a better team than I think a lot of people would admit at the time. I mean, they'll probably be a mid-major that challenges for their conference championship this year. But I didn't feel like Carolina really took that game lightly, and I don't think they took this game lightly either. I think Georgetown is going to be a team that's going to be pretty competitive with a lot of the teams that they play in Big East play. I think you'll see that. I don't know how many games they're going to win, but I know that they are going to be a team that's going to be competitive. But, I mean, Carolina just did what they had to do in this game, man. You were looking for Carolina to come in here and not make a statement, but I think you wanted them to come in and play a really complete game, really, put a little bit of distance in between them and Georgetown at times and feel comfortable with, a win that, that comes in the Smith Center against a team that you just never really know if you end up seeing them again sometime during March. But I think Carolina, they came out in the first half, similar stuff to what we've seen, some turnover issues, allowing Georgetown to get to the paint a lot easier than they probably would have liked. And we saw Carolina for the second straight game find a way to adjust when it mattered the most on the defensive end of the floor, take away what Georgetown was wanting to do. And ultimately it leads to a poor shooting half for the Hoyas. It leads to, a successful shooting half for Carolina where they start to find their range a little bit in that second half. And that's how Carolina is able to pull away and get a pretty significant win over Georgetown. Not a game that, is going to go on the resume as of right now because it's a quad 3 game, but certainly one that I think has Carolina fans feeling pretty good about where the team is at and feeling a little bit better after, watching Kentucky in their game following the win for Carolina just get absolutely demolished.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you look at this Georgetown team, and I think the expectation is for them to be competitive in what's turning out to be a pretty bad Big East. We sit here a month and a half into, or a little bit over a month into the season. The Big East is not good. There's not a lot of depth behind really UConn, because St. John's has been one of the major disappointments in all of college basketball so far this season. And you could see why. They're tough, they're gritty, they're well coached. And, I told you they were going to cause problems with some of their ball screen action. Now, granted, a lot of it moving screens, but we don't call those anymore in the year of our Lord 2025. And so I wasn't surprised that Ed Cooley had his team ready to go. I wasn't surprised that they were competitive in the first half. And I wasn't discouraged that the game was as close as it was, or the fact that, Georgetown came out punching. They led 15-9 at the first media timeout. And I think they were still leading at the second media timeout. But you felt like as the game would move along with what Carolina was doing on the boards, and just the fact that the threes that they took and that they missed in the first half, those are threes you got to take. Because they were open threes, they were transition threes, they were corner threes. So they were all the types of the threes that you want to get, and those are the type. And Georgetown was sacrificing threes for twos because they knew going into the game without their starting big man, they did not have what it was going to take inside. And so I think it got pretty simple for Heber Davis at halftime. They shot 67% from inside the arc in the first half. Do that more often. And good Lord knows, did they do that? Caleb Wilson, I think, hit 4 turnaround jumpers in the second half alone that are shots that for most people are going to be, make or miss shots. Where for him, it's just about a given. When he gets about 12 feet in from the basket, his touch is so good that shot's going to go down more than often. They had no answer for Henri Veesaar, who continues to excel and is really making the claim to be, if they were to put together a starting 5 of all transfers, he'd be the starting big man on that starting 5. He's been as valuable as any transfer in the country so far. And both of those guys were just absolutely magnificent yesterday. You got Luka Bogovac kind of going in the right direction. Finally, an efficient night from the field overall, was 5 of 10, just 1 of 5 from behind the three-point line. And, I think it was important to see what the offense looked like. And it looked a lot more fluid than what you saw on Tuesday. And I think part of that is you got to give Kentucky credit, man. They turned that game into a grinder, and Carolina was able to grind one out. This game had a little bit more pace to it. And over the course of 40 minutes, Carolina's talent, their skill, their athleticism, it definitely showed out in a big way on their way to a pretty comfortable win. Let's go ahead and take a look at the box score from the Georgetown win. I pulled up for you guys. So those of you who can watch, you can see it on your screen as well. As I mentioned, Carolina shoots 48% from the field. They were 29 of 60. On the other side, Georgetown shoots 33% from the field. They were just 24 of 72. Carolina, with a good number of makes from behind the three-point line, they were 9 of 28. So it just equates to 32%. I will let you know, though, that I think they were 9 for 24 at one point. So that percentage could have been a lot higher had they not settled for the types of threes that they did in the closing stretch. On the other hand, they defended the three-point line really, really well. Georgetown just 4 of 23 from behind the arc, and they started the game 2 for 2. So they went 2 for their next 21. Both teams could have shot better at the foul line. Carolina just 14 of 21 after starting the game 12 for 12. So another area where they can improve upon from this win. Georgetown 9 of 12. So just didn't get to the foul line, nowhere near enough. Both teams took care of the basketball. 9 turnovers for Carolina led to 8 points for the Hoyas. Carolina forced just 4 turnovers, scored 6 points off of it. They did win the rebounding margin 45-36, including 38-25 on the defensive glass. Carolina was out-rebounded on the offensive glass 11-7. They were outscored in the second chance points area 10-8. Carolina's bench, though, comes up big. They outscored Georgetown's 19-7. Georgetown, the advantage in the paint, 32-26. They had the advantage in fast break points as well, 10-2. Carolina had 4 blocks compared to just 2 for Georgetown. The Hoyas did have more steals than Carolina, 6-2. The Heels, though, had 15 assists on their 29 made baskets. Georgetown with 9 assists on their 24 made baskets. The game was tied 2 times. There were 5 different lead changes. All in all, Carolina, though, did lead for this box score says they led for 33 minutes and 3 seconds. So that's a look at the box score there from the win over Georgetown. We'll bring ourselves back up here on the screen for you guys as we transition now to the quote of the game and Hubert Davis. So this is something we've heard him say quite a bit so far here in the early part of the season. He liked the way his team responded in the second half.
I believe we're growing. We're getting better at it. It's not a finished product. I feel like we've got a long way to go. But, one of the things that I consistently talk to them about is how do you react and how do you respond? And so with the physicality, how are we going to respond in the way that we did specifically in the second half to hold them to just 10 points in the paint, 0 fast break points, I thought was huge. And so, I thought our defense, 22% in the second half versus a really good Georgetown team, and out-rebounded them as well. And so really happy about that.
Every coach has a buzzword or a catchphrase that they use every time they talk to the media. React and respond is something you hear from Hubert Davis before every game, during every game, and after every game. And he mentioned the physicality there. I didn't get the sense being in the arena. I didn't think that Carolina was out physical. I didn't think that Georgetown was punking them in any sort of fashion. I think what I took away was I didn't think that he felt like Carolina imposed their will nowhere near as much as they should have, just given their size. And that was the big difference in the second half. There was just a greater sense of commitment to get Caleb Wilson the ball on the block, to get Henri Veesaar on the ball at the foul line extended, and just let those two guys do what they do best, which is just beat people up one-on-one. Their ability just to get to the board. I felt like every time there was a shot that was missed and it was rebounded by a Carolina player, it was Wilson or Veesaar that was the guy bringing down the basketball, and that's what it should be because They're the two best rebounders on the team. I thought the big adjustment that I liked defensively was I thought Carolina, while not pressing nowhere near as much as I maybe wanted them to, I thought just extending their defense and picking up right there at the timeline, just extending the pressure was a big difference, because all of a sudden now Georgetown's having to run their offense, 25, 30 feet away from the basket and not getting into their actions with 10, 12 seconds on the shot clock. And that's something about this team, man, I think you got to appreciate. And we've talked about this at different points. There's just been games where they just decide we're gonna win this game with our defense. We know that we can score it. We know our offense is still in flux without Seth Trimble. So we're gonna guard, and we're gonna get in a stance, and we're gonna run you off ball screens. We're gonna contest, we're gonna challenge, we're gonna bump, we're gonna do everything we got to do defensively. And it's different from what we've kind of grown up seeing, because as guys that have watched the Roy Williams era, you saw a lot of high-flying basketball, Carolina winning games because they were outscoring the opponent. But this is really fun to watch because Georgetown got demoralized. It felt like they knew when they shot the ball it wasn't going in, because they had to work so hard to get whatever shot they want, and they were having to just settle for contested shot after contested shot. And we've seen this happen now really in all of Carolina's big wins. The second half against Kansas, the second half against Kentucky, and now the second half against Georgetown. Their 3 wins against power conference opponents all started with what they did on the defensive end of the floor.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, that's really the shining light of this game for Carolina, just as a team, is that defensively, I thought they looked really good in this one in the second half. The first half, I thought there were moments, and what I think he's talking about physicality-wise was more the guards for Georgetown really being physical against Carolina's guards and really finding a way to get to their spots in the lane. And that was ultimately what led to such easy baskets for Georgetown, allowed them to sort of hang around. Where if Carolina defends that way in the first half, then this is a game that's over at halftime, and we're talking about Carolina potentially winning this game by like 40 points or something like that. I think that certainly could have been on the table. Now, the thing is that you have to give some credit to Georgetown. They've got some really good players as well. I think, you look at it, KJ Lewis is certainly a guy that it makes sense why he wanted to transfer from Arizona, because he wanted to be the guy. There were moments yesterday where he looked like the guy. And I think that was certainly something that was testing Carolina. In the first half, Malik Mack had 5 points in that first half, was able to get to where he wanted to at times. And then Julius Halifanoa, he was a guy that showed, why Carolina was interested in him a little bit last year. There were some moments from him where he was able to get inside, get some position, and finish. But loved the way that Carolina turned the intensity up. You could see the guy that really sort of changed the mindset for Carolina, I thought, was Henri Veesaar. Definitely vocal on the floor. You could see as the game went along, he started to become more and more vocal. And I think that really was something that Carolina fed off of in this game, and it showed up on that defensive end of the floor. But, this is 2 straight games, man, where Carolina in the first half, you go back to that game against Kentucky, all but 3 points came in the paint in that first half. In this game, 22 of the 39 came in the paint in the first half. So not nearly the same ratio. They were hitting some shots from the perimeter as well. That was helping. But still, that was an area that Carolina needed to shut off in the second half. They do. And you see they hold them to 22 second half points. They shoot just terribly in that second half, shoot 22% in that second half. So, this is exactly what you're looking for. If you're Carolina, you're hoping that you're going to be able to do this moving forward against some of the teams that you see in ACC play. And I think it's going to carry over. It's hard not to believe in what this team is doing defensively, because it just seems like everybody is bought in. And it seems like it's been happening for so many games now that it's not going to be a letdown once you get to conference play. This team is legitimately good defensively. And that's one of the things that I think helps a group that still, at moments, especially we saw it at times in that first half, still isn't the greatest in half-court offense. Still has some, some steps that they need to take there. But I think having a defense that's as smothering as this one can be, even when they're not creating turnovers, is definitely something that's a big positive for Carolina.
Yeah, I don't have him written down as something that we're going to talk about extensively, but part of what hindered Carolina's ability to take away Georgetown's penetration was when Kai and Evans picked up that second foul. It just changed the tune, I thought, for the game. And from my vantage point, I thought it was a cheap foul, and it was one that I think just kind of made Carolina play a little tentative, because it was basically a touch foul that if we're calling that contact, then what are you going to call? And I thought Kai, and I felt bad for Kai, because he comes out, he makes a three, the very first possession of the game. He ends up scoring 7 points in 20 minutes. Had some moments where he looked like he was maybe trying to break out of the slump that he's in to start his time here at Carolina. And so I thought, that kind of changed in the second half. They were able to extend their ball pressure. The game got a little bit more physical with what they just allowed to go without being called. But part of that's been something that Carolina struggled with is you don't have Seth Trimble, who's your best perimeter defender. And what game has Kai and Evans not gotten in foul trouble? It feels like it's the same thing we were with Elliot Cadeau last year. By the 12-minute mark of the first half, my man's going to have 2 fouls to be on the bench. And that's not a good place for Carolina right now, because that forced Jaden Young to be on the court. And I can tell you, man, there was a collective groan when Jaden Young walked onto the court, because he's done absolutely nothing so far this season for Carolina. But Hubert Davis, had to go to him in that moment. But it is what you like about this group is that you can tell that they're coachable, and you can tell that when they go into the locker room, and they figure out what minor adjustments you have to make, because you only got 15 minutes. They're able to make those adjustments, and they're really able to apply them in a big way when they walk back on the court in the second half. And so, it was cool to see, or it was fun to see what Carolina was able to do defensively. And I'm having a lot of fun watching this team play and win that way, because it gives Dean Smith throwback vibes. This is how Carolina won when Dean Smith was coaching. Efficient offense, shooting near 50% from the field, making enough perimeter shots, beating teams up on the opponent, but they were always really good defensively. And Carolina's defensive rating entering today's action for college basketball was 20 spots higher than their offensive rating. I'd find it hard to believe how many times that's happened in the last 20, 25 years. And I think Carolina's offense is going to improve. That's the expectation. But I don't think it's going to be with the defense dropping off. I expect Carolina to be a top 25 defense in KenPom throughout the remainder of the season. Stat of the game, I went with 3-point shooting. Carolina 9 of 28 from three. So just equates to 32%. Although, as I mentioned, they were, I think, 9 of 24 at one point, and they took a handful of threes there in the final minute or two. On the flip side, Georgetown finishes the game just 4 of 23 for 17%, and I think they made their first 2 threes. So I believe they started 2 for 2, and then they went combined 2 for 21 the rest of the way. You look at this from Carolina's perspective, you get 9 makes, but you get a make from Powell. You get 3 makes from Derek Dixon, Luka Bogovac, Jared Stevenson, Veesaar, Kai, and Evans all made threes. So it was really spaced out. I'll tell you this. I thought Jared Stevenson, I thought he took threes that were within the rhythm of the offense. I think he took 3 of them in the corner. You got to make those. And that's something that we talked about so much when he transferred from Alabama. What he's brought Carolina defensively as a connector, as a rebounder, has been invaluable. And he's played his butt off. But I do think, moving forward, when the competition is a lot stiffer and you're playing better teams in Georgetown when you get into ACC play, that's going to determine how much he does play. Is when those three-pointers fall into his lap, can you shoot better than 1 for 5 on a much more consistent basis. But the big thing here was Derek Dixon. Just, I mean, being a flamethrower, coming off what he did at Kentucky, you knew he was going to be confident. He looked confident, and he shot really well from behind the arc last night. And so you combine that with Veesaar going 2 of 3 from 3. I think, we still haven't seen this team shoot it the way we want them to shoot it, the way that we expect them to shoot it. But if they're going to get this type of balance from their perimeter shooting, it almost makes up for it, because you're still having to guard all 5 guys on the perimeter, and that's a real tough thing to do. And at some point, you would think with the looks that they're generating, they'll start to shoot a much more efficient percentage on a much more consistent basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can live in the area that you were in yesterday, I feel like you're probably going to take that most games. I mean, I know 32% isn't great. That's nothing to pound your chest over. But at the same time, I mean, if you can get 9 threes per game, I think you're probably living with that. If you're Carolina, you'd probably like to bump that number up just a slight bit, especially when you go against some of the better teams on your schedule. Like, I'm going to tell you, when you play Duke, you're going to have to shoot it better than that from the outside if you're going to win. When you play Louisville, you're going to have to shoot it better from the outside if you want to win that game. Those are teams that are going to be able to score points against you. Even with as good as your defense is, you want to make sure that you're able to knock down, 11, 12 threes in games like that. And I think when they need that to happen, I still feel like this group will be able to do it. We saw it against Kansas, man. They needed to knock down shots from the outside, and they were able to do it. In this game, they needed to start knocking down some shots from the outside to really pull away. They were able to do it. So I hope this is what we're going to see. Jaren Stevenson, as you said, definitely would like to see him be a little more accurate from beyond the arc. But I think that's part of just him as a player. We knew that coming in from his time at Alabama, that he wasn't necessarily the most efficient three-point shooter. You'd also like to see a little bit more efficiency from Luka Bogovac out there. 1 of 5 is, not great by any stretch of the imagination. But at least he was able to knock down that one, and at least the rest of the day was more efficient for him inside the arc. But yeah, if you could see him become a little more consistent from out there, Jonathan Powell maybe become a little more consistent from out there. Just one of those guys, I think, being a little bit more consistent gets to that range that you want them to be at, which is 11, 12 threes a game if they're going to attempt this many from beyond the arc. And then we're really talking about Carolina cooking from beyond the arc. But I thought this was one of the better games for them on the perimeter. I give them a lot of credit, and it's part of the reason why they were able to win as comfortably as they were.
Well, and I still think what this team has done all year long is they've made the timely threes. When they've needed to make that three, it was there. You look at Kentucky, they got the 3 from Luka in the corner. Of course, you get the step back 3 from Derek Dixon. There were some threes last night when Carolina wasn't able to really extend their lead in the manner that you wanted them to. But it's an 8-point game, but you get an open look from 3, you make it. Now it's an 11-point game, where now it's a 12-point game, but you've had some empty possessions. Could Georgetown crawl back into it? You get a 3 to push it up to 15. And so I think that's as important as anything. Like, yes, you need to shoot more efficient, and I think they're still capable of doing that because they're still generating better looks. Like, the quality of shot this team gets compared to what the quality of shot last year's team produced is night and day. And so that's why I'm still encouraged by their ability to still shoot the basketball, because I mean, if they're, when you're getting the shots that you're getting, I expect you to shoot a better percentage over the span of 30 plus games. Right now they've played in 9 games. It's still a sample size to draw conclusions of, but we'll see how this thing looks at when we get into March. If they're still getting this quality of look on a night in, night out basis, I do think their percentages from behind the 3-point line collectively, they will go up as the season does move along. Let's now get into more thoughts, more takeaways from the win last night over Georgetown, and we'll talk about this front court that just has me all kinds of giddy, man. Like, I think they are why you turn this team on and watch them play. It's to watch Caleb Wilson because he's the freshman. He's going to be, the lottery pick, so on and so forth. But Henri Veesaar is really emerged as a guy that might be as fun as anyone to watch because of the way that he plays. There's a Brady Manick feel to him where whenever he makes something happen on the court, he talks. I thought, last night you saw him, and I think it speaks volumes about how comfortable he is as a leader. You saw him challenge Caleb Wilson and really get in his ear a little bit. And Caleb, I think, needs that because, he's getting a lot of praise, but he needs to be reminded, hey, you got to do your job and you got to play to a certain level. But, I mean, these guys last night, they combined for 38 points and 29 rebounds. They both played 35-plus minutes. And I think, Caleb Wilson doing what he's doing as a freshman is sensational and spectacular in his own right. He's really putting himself in the conversation to be the best one and done we've ever seen. But Veesaar, showed up at Chapel Hill without a double-double during his time at Arizona. And all of a sudden, he's a walking double-double machine. Is providing the offense you need him because he can stretch the floor, make those 3-pointers to open up the defense. He's as aggressive a pick and roll guy Carolina has had. And him and Kai Evans had a nice 2-man game where when he gets it, he rolls. When he gets the ball, he's not there to lay it up. He's there to dunk the ball, and he's there to dunk it down with authority. Georgetown had no answer for them. Absolutely none. And once Carolina just decided to play bully ball, it's why they were able to just, I thought, physically beat them up to the point where, like, Caleb Wilson initiates so much contact that half of it goes uncalled because if they called all the contact that he's initiating, that he's drawing, he'd live at the foul line and no one wants to watch, a free throw shooting contest. But, these two guys that continue to impress, they continue to impose their will, and yet again, against a power conference opponent, they overwhelmed, Georgetown's front court, and they were the biggest reason why Carolina won and won by the margin that they did.
The scoring itself is amazing. 38 points combined in this game. It just feels like whenever Carolina needs a bucket, you can give it to one of these two guys, and they're going to find a way to get it done. Caleb Wilson, with the face-up game that he has, it's almost impossible to slow him down. And, the 20 points for him in this game, felt a little, quiet for him because we didn't see a dunk. We're so used to seeing him attack the rim that way, and we didn't get to see one last night, not one that went in. And so it felt like, it was a quieter performance from him, but still, he was out there as Carolina's leading scorer, putting together a really solid performance that actually improves his points per game on the season. That's how good the performance was from him, even though it was one that I don't think many are going to hearken back to and say was his best performance. But, you're talking about 20 and 14 from him. That is going to be one of the best performances that we probably see from him. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping there is more that he can unlock. And all of a sudden, we're talking about a dude that could put up, one of those types of games that we saw from Bryce Johnson, a 30 and 20 type game or something like that. I'm telling you, he is one of the most entertaining guys in all of college basketball because of how many different ways he can score the ball. And I know that at times it looks like he's trying to do a little bit too much, especially against the double teams. But I think he's starting to get that under control a little bit. I felt like he was more controlled in this game than he was in the previous two games. And so he'll continue to learn from that. But then when you've got a guy like Veesaar who can just do so much for you, man. The screen and roll ability of him. They were working that all night for the most part, whether it was him and Kai Evans, him and Derek Dixon were getting it to work as well. And I really thought the moment where the game changed was when Carolina started giving him the ball late in the first half. And he really started to go to work. That was when Carolina all of a sudden started to take control. And even though they were down, they were not down 5, up 5 at halftime, you felt like Carolina was still in control of the game. And it felt like, man, if they can continue to build on what they did at the end of the first half, they're really going to be able to take control and put this one away. And that's exactly what they were able to do. I mean, these two guys, the way that they're playing, they said it on the broadcast, and you look at it and you think, just thinking in your mind, you would think, okay, there's got to be a big duo that has done what they've done, since the 1990s. They really haven't. If you look at it, it's one incredibly dominant big. And then there's usually a second guy that runs with them that's solid, but not putting up 16 points a game. The last duo to put up the similar numbers to what these guys are, both over 16 points per game and rebounding the way that they are, was Jerry Stackhouse and Rasheed Wallace back in the 1994-95 season. So these guys are doing some special things. This is going to be a big duo that we're going to talk about for a long time. And again, I cannot say it enough, man. Whenever we do these podcasts, thank the Lord they went out and got Henri Veesaar in the transfer portal, because he has worked so perfectly with Caleb Wilson. I thought last night it was great seeing that moment where Caleb Wilson makes a mistake and Henri lets him hear about it. And it's not Henri saying, look, I'm better than you or anything like that. It's him saying, hey, Rook, come on, man, let's get this under control here. A little bit of frustration from him. And I think that's the type of leadership that we were lacking last year on the floor, and why you're seeing Carolina succeed this year.
Yeah, we'll just go ahead and get into the discussion topic and then have our other conclusions and hand in our game balls before we get out of here. I took my dad to the game, and I told them, I said, dude, this is John Henson, this is Tyler Zeller vibes. And now you mentioned statistically, those guys didn't even average, what Sheed and Stackhouse did. But, I mean, it's hard to hold a candle to what those two guys did. And it's kind of, we talked about it when we did the What If series back over the summer. It's kind of dumbfounding that you had those two guys doing what they did in the front court, were as explosive, as dynamic as they were, and Carolina wasn't able to win, a national championship. But you look at Henson and Zeller, those were, for 2 years, they were the backbone of what Carolina was. In 2010, 2011, and then 2011, 2012, it was those two guys. Like, yes, you had Kendall Marshall, who was the best passing point guard in the country. You had Harrison Barnes, who was the number 1 overall recruit, and at times you saw why he was that, but never really lived up to that guy. I mean, you look at there was a set that Carolina ran once a game where they got the alley-oop on the backdoor cut on the backdoor screen from John Henson. That play's now returned. Now I don't think they ran it yesterday. They did have an alley-oop opportunity for Wilson that was just a poor pass that was able to take it away. But like, that's the impact that it felt like those two guys. It felt like every time out you were going to get 30 points, 20 rebounds between the two of them. And Zeller was a much more of the scorer. Henson was much more of the rebounder / rim protector. But it just felt like, especially, Zeller's senior year and Henson's junior year, those guys every night were going to put, together a double-double or close to it. And that's where Wilson and Veesaar are at, where I think it's fair to expect them every single time they walk on the court to get you 15-plus points and at least 9-plus rebounds. And it just leads me drawing conclusions. I mean, this has to be the best 1-2 tandem in college basketball. And I'm not talking point guard and big man. I'm just talking pure what's a better 1-2 punch than what these two guys are offering you right now, because they've proven they can do it against mid-major competition. They've proven they can do it against, power conference competition. And we still got to see how this thing plays out. But these two guys could really power Carolina to an ACC regular season title, and who knows where else, because they're gifted, they're motivated, they complement one another. Like, we're watching Caleb Wilson learn how to handle double teams, but there's going to get to a point where they're going to have to quit doubling him, because if you leave Veesaar, he's just going to find him for a layup, dunk, foul, so on and so forth. And it's going to make Carolina, I think, that much more lethal offensively, because all the attention these guys draw individually, they play, great in the high-low game together. I mean, I can just keep going on, but I mean, I watch a lot of college basketball. I know you watch a lot of college basketball. I've yet to see another tandem that's as explosive and as dynamic that complements each other, as well as Caleb Wilson and Henri Veesaar.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to act like I've seen every team in the country, and I know that this is for sure the only tandem that could do this because, I mean, look, there might be some other tandems that could outscore this group, but I think the way that they do it, the old school feel, is really what is interesting and what is entertaining to watch as a Carolina fan. And to me, they're the best big duo, no question, in the country. I don't know if there's any other one that really competes with it because you look at the ability to defend for these guys. I think that's what separates them from maybe even some of the other big man combos in the country. There are other good defensive big man combos. I mean, don't get it wrong. There is one down the road in Durham that is pretty successful as well, but they're not as successful offensively. And that's the thing that's amazing is that these guys on both ends of the floor have been unbelievable. I mean, I think we expected this out of Caleb Wilson. I think we all, maybe not this good, but I think we all expected him to come in and put up some numbers and really be an explosive athlete, be able to defend at a pretty high rate. I think the question was Henri Veesaar and being able to handle playing a more significant role. I mean, we were talking coming into the year, you know, how many minutes a game can you play this guy? Because at Arizona, you know, he was averaging 20 per game. So was he ready to step up and play as many minutes as he was probably going to have to play because we knew that the backup 5 position was going to be a concern. And he has stepped up and played as well as just about anybody could have hoped for. What he's doing on the offensive end, I think, is outstanding. I think it is very similar to what you saw at times from Tyler Zeller, a little bit more aggressive, version of what Zeller used to bring to the table. But I think this duo is outstanding. It's got to be, if it's not the top in the country, it is right there. It is one of the top 3 or 4 best in the country. So, I mean, yeah, credit to Carolina for putting these guys together. It really seems like it's working out. And I'm interested to see what it looks like the remainder of the season and how, more importantly, how far it can carry them in the NCAA tournament. Because we have said, we wanted the old school feel. We wanted something that reminded us a little of Roy Williams. Well, we've got it right now going on in the front court at Carolina. And boy, it feels good to be back with a dominant front court.
Yeah, the one thing they got to figure out and give, Hubert Davis credit, he's trying to find – they've got to find a backup big because, there's going to be a game where one of them are in foul trouble where they've got to sit for an extended period of time. But when those two guys are on the floor, Carolina can play with and is as good as any team in the country. And you're right, man. Look, when you get to those Duke games – those games are always physical, high tense, emotional, whatever words you want to describe it. When this front court goes up against, Boozer, and Gamba and what those guys have, it's going to be a war. And it'll really give a 90s feeling to the rivalry. Let's get to the backcourt because that was a big topic of discussion going in. And, Hubert Davis opts to start Kyan Evans, which I think for a fan base that wanted to hear Derek Dixon's name called, I did think it was ultimately the right decision. But tell them, look, you've got a chance here to either earn your place or, if you start poorly, if you commit a bad turnover, whatever it is, I'm taking you out because I know that I trust this guy to come in here and play at a high level and execute what I'm asking him to do as an offensive, floor general and then setting the defense as well. And I smiled for Kai when he came out and hit that 3 because no one in the gym needed that more than he did. And he had a nice little layup where he played through contact, something I think he's really struggled with while he's, made his transition here to Carolina. The most important thing we saw Hubert Davis play them together. And it wasn't for an extended period of time. Because of foul trouble and just the way the game was being played didn't allow as such. But you saw moments where Dixon was the lead ball handler and Kyan Evans is playing off of him. And I think that is going to be such beneficial to him moving forward where he can just be a shooter, where he can just be a scorer, as opposed to having to carry the burden of doing, of leading the team when they're on offense and they're on defense. Still the biggest takeaway is what Derek Dixon is providing this team. Off the bench last night, he gives Carolina 14 points on 5 of 7 shooting, 3 of 5 from 3 in 27 minutes, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He did have the 1 turn, but I mean, was just playing at a ridiculous high level. And you could see his confidence, and you could feel his confidence build with every shot that he made. And this was a godsend, man. Carolina's backcourt's been in such flux without Seth Trimble. You're playing Luka Bogovac out of position. He's not a 2-guard by trade. Carolina wants to play him at the 3. And all of a sudden, this freshman, makes 2 massive plays on the road at Kentucky. We were all anxious to see how he would follow that up. He comes back to Chapel Hill in front of a pretty raucous crowd and has another good showing. And, if these 2 guys can combine to give Carolina what they gave Carolina last night while you're waiting for Seth Trimble to return, then Carolina is going to be tough to beat considering what we talked about, what they're getting from Veesaar and Wilson down low.
Yeah, I mean, he gave you exactly what you were hoping for from that position and exactly what you thought you were going to get from Kyan Evans for when we were talking in the preseason. And for most of the offseason, we looked at it and thought this is exactly who Kyan Evans is going to be. He's going to be a guy that can control everything offensively, that can share the ball at a decent rate, not as good of a rate maybe as we saw from Elliot Cadeau in terms of the number of assists, but he's going to be a little bit more efficient with the basketball. And when it comes to hitting big shots, he's going to be able to hit big shots. And it felt like just about every 3 that Derek Dixon hit yesterday was an important one for Carolina. And so, I mean, yeah, you got to keep commending him for how good he is. I mean, the play off the inbounds where he just hits a shot, basically a step back shot, that was beautiful. He is a tremendous player for Carolina and one that's only going to get better as his role continues to increase. I mean, for me, he would be the starter moving forward for Carolina at that position. Now, does that mean that Kyan Evans is necessarily out of the starting lineup? Doesn't have to mean that. If you feel like Kyan Evans can play better off ball, then I think that's where you play him. And, this was brought up during the broadcast, and we knew this coming in because we had talked about it a little bit during the last couple of weeks with Kyan. There is the option to play him off ball. He played off ball a lot last year at Colorado State, where Nick Clifford was the guy that was handling a lot of stuff that they did a year ago. So maybe that's the way that Carolina goes. And they experimented a little bit with that lineup, couldn't do it as much as they wanted to because of the foul trouble. But if that's a lineup that ends up working for Carolina, if they can get the 3-point shooting that they were hoping to get, well, then you're going to have to put that lineup out there. If Luka's not going to be more efficient, well, then that's the lineup that you might have to roll with. And I thought one thing that I liked a little bit better from Kyan's perspective in this game was I thought he did a really good job of driving the basket. I thought there was more attention to that than there was earlier in the season. So I think you see that from him. We know Derek Dixon has that ability because he showed it against Kentucky. And so if these guys can put a little more pressure on the rim, and if you're going to shoot the way that Derek Dixon does from the outside, then, I mean, you're feeling pretty good about this point guard spot for Carolina, which is something that, just a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about it, really after Thanksgiving, we were saying, where does this team go at the point guard spot? After that game against Michigan State, we were like, this is a tough situation here because you don't know, we liked what we saw from Derek Dixon, but you hadn't had either guy really step up. So I think they're in a pretty good spot right now. I trust that Dixon is going to keep getting better as the year goes along. And I think Carolina's got a guy that could be a really big contributor for them as Seth Trimble eventually comes back into the lineup. And the bigger thing is that we know at this point, Carolina has gotten much deeper. Like, if you're going to continue to bring Derek Dixon off the bench, well, you got a dude that just scored 14 points off the bench for you. Your bench in this game had 19 points for you. That's got to be the most of the season so far. So, I mean, what a tremendous job, by Hubert Davis and this staff, by trusting in Derek Dixon. But what a great job by him of stepping up when Carolina needed it the most. After that Michigan State game where they really needed someone at that position to come to the forefront and start to play better, well, he's the guy that did it. And even though that might not be the guy that we expected to do it, I think that's certainly something that we're going to be able to carry throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I don't think Derek Dixon's role is diminishing anytime soon. I think it's really, what does it look like for Kyan Evans moving forward? Do you continue to start Kyan? But I mean, Kyan, started yesterday, played 20 minutes. Derek Dixon played 27 minutes off the bench. I think you need to play them together. And then what does this ultimately look like once you get Trimble back and then you really now you have some legitimate depth in your backcourt? How does Hubert Davis manage that rotation? Because I don't feel like Evans can play off ball with Trimble in the half court. I want Trimble playing off ball. So, how does Hubert Davis maybe stagger playing Evans and Dixon together and Dixon and Trimble together? Because I think, there's a scenario where both those guys could complement playing off the ball with Dixon, on the floor as the lead guard. Did want to just bring this graphic to attention that the basketball account tweeted out as we're sitting here and recording. Just brings us back to Wilson and Veesaar. Yesterday they combined. They became the first two Tar Heels to both have 18-plus points in a game with 14-plus rebounds in a game since Sean May and Marvin Williams did that back in the 2004-2005 season. So, you got the Jerry Stackhouse, Rasheed Wallace comps in terms of averages, and then you get what they did last night in an individual game, throwing you back to, a front court that, helped Carolina win a national championship. And I don't think these lofty comparisons are going away. I don't think, and I don't think this is going to be the last time they're putting numbers up that, revel what some other elite front courts have done for Carolina, just because they're both that good. Boozer makes it difficult, but I mean, you would have to imagine if you had to place your first team all ACC votes today, I mean, both these guys would probably lead that. And maybe you put Boozer as your 3-man and you just have a really big, all ACC starting lineup, but that's what they're doing. And they're making it hard to kind of make you feel otherwise. So I did want to bring that to attention here before we did get out of this edition, of the podcast. I had, as a takeaway, second half defense suffocated, once again. Don't really need to expand upon that. We talked about that, at the beginning, and then we kind of talked about stat of the game where I mentioned their 3-point defense. But, you're glossing back at the numbers. Georgetown shoots 33% from the field, 17% from three. Lewis was their most efficient scorer. He scored 17 points, was 7 of 15 from the floor, but just 1 of 5 from behind, the 3-point line. So did not impact the game in that department the way that, he would have liked to really give Georgetown, a chance to be competitive. And so we knew Carolina wasn't going to be able to turn them over, and they didn't. They only forced 4 turnovers. They scored 6 points off of them, but all in all, just another solid night for Carolina on that end of the floor and doing things that, they have to do to really play to their strength and look like the team that, we talked about in the preseason, that we talked about after the win over Kansas, where it felt like their floor had been elevated and their ceiling was elevated to where we thought they were a legitimate threat to win this conference. And maybe, when we get to March and we get to Selection Sunday, be a team that we're putting into the Final Four when we fill out our brackets. So with that in mind, let's go ahead, hand out some game balls, and then we'll wrap up shop for this edition. I'll do the honors and I'll go first. And I'm gonna take Veesaar for this one. He'll get my game ball. You look at his stat line in totality: 18 points, 6 of 11 from the field, 2 of 3 from 3, 4 of 7 from the foul line with 15 boards, 3 assists. He did have 4 fouls in the game and did commit 2 turnovers, but His energy was contagious. His activity was off the charts. And you're right. There was a point in that first half where it felt like he knew we've got them on the ropes and they can't guard me. And so I'm just going to go set that middle floor high ball screen. I'm going to roll the basket and I'm going to lay it up. I'm going to dunk it or I'm going to get fouled. And Georgetown simply just had no answer for that. I love the emotion that he plays with. I love the leadership that he's providing this team. He doesn't play the same way that Brady Manick played, but I think he's having that same impact as a transfer coming in. Kind of same thing we saw with Cormac and Harrison Ingram as well, where he's emotional. I think this team feeds off his emotion. He's not afraid, though, to look at the best player on the floor and keep him in check. I think that goes a long way as well. And so I thought, even though he wasn't Carolina's leading point getter yesterday, I thought he was the best player on the floor for Carolina. And that's why Henri Veesaar gets my game ball for the win over Georgetown.
Yeah, I really want to give mine to Derek Dixon, but, I mean, how could you not give it to Caleb Wilson? I mean, Derek Dixon was fantastic. 14 points on 5 of 7 shooting, as we said, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc. But Caleb Wilson, I mean, just what he's able to do, the soft touch around the rim, that really works for him as well as just about anybody. That 10 to 12-foot jumper that he's able to make because of how smooth he is, that's impossible to stop. And he put that on display in this game. 20 points to lead the team, 7 of 12 from the field, 6 of 6 from the foul line, which is not nothing considering that everybody else that took a foul shot missed at least one. He was the one guy that didn't. 14 rebounds, had the most offensive rebounds in the game with 3. Did have 1 assist, 2 turnovers in the first half. That's certainly something you want to see get cut down because it did feel like he was a little bit out of control at times in that first half. That was part of what led to Henri Veesaar, saying what he was saying to him on the court. Like, hey, man, we can't turn the ball over in that circumstance. We got to value the ball a little bit better. But he played 35 minutes in this game, did a good job of staying out of foul trouble. And so this was just a complete performance from Caleb Wilson all around. Thought he did a good job inside, especially when he had to get matched up a couple of times with Julius Halifanoa. I thought he did a really good job on him. So credit to him. He looked really good in this game on both ends of the floor once again. And so Caleb Wilson will get my game ball.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. In the meantime, we encourage you guys to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. We had you covered yesterday with the preview and the recap of the game. I'll do the same for the upcoming game against USC Upstate. That's when Carolina's back in action this Saturday. Might try to get an opinion article out or two just after the first month or so of the season, but be on the lookout for all the best basketball coverage, HeelToughBlog.com. Same thing for Carolina football. Another transfer portal entry today. Not a surprising one, but just another one to be noted of. Anthony had you covered with that as we have all offseason long with all the entries so far. Same thing with National Signing Day coming and going last week for Carolina. And we look out for the future for more portal entries and maybe staff changes coming to Chapel or to Bill Belichick's staff there in Chapel Hill. So get the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. The latest best coverage of Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any audio editions of the show moving forward. If you consume the podcast on the digital platform, the best way to keep up with us, like the Facebook page, Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. The second that we go live, you'll get a notification set to your mobile device. You can tap in and be a part of the conversation. With that, that is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you guys for both watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.